Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, I invite you to set aside the noise of the day, to rest your thoughts, and to allow yourself to drift into a calmer space. As you settle in, take a slow, deep breath and let your body relax. This is your time, your quiet moment, where history becomes a gentle companion to guide you into rest. In this journey, we will travel back to the world of the Victorians, not through the eyes of queens or statesmen, but through the lives of ordinary people. Together, we will walk the cobblestone streets, step inside the small homes, and share in the struggles and simple joys of everyday life. It will be a story told slowly, softly, with care, so that you may both learn and drift toward sleep. So, rest easy, let your mind wander gently into the past. Tonight, we dive into the story of what life was like for ordinary Victorians. Imagine closing your eyes and letting yourself drift backward through the years, slipping through the layers of history as though you were walking down a quiet corridor of time. The sounds of the modern world grow fainter and fainter until they disappear entirely. The hum of electricity fades, the rush of traffic vanishes, and you find yourself surrounded by silence broken only by the gentle toll of a distant church bell. You open your eyes to discover that you are standing in the 19th century, in the age of Queen Victoria. The year is somewhere between 1837 and 1901, and the world around you is both familiar and strange. The air is different here. It carries with it the scent of coal smoke, mingled with the dampness of stone streets and the faint aroma of horse manure left behind by the carriages that clatter over cobblestones. A pale mist curls along the edges of narrow alleys, wrapping buildings in a veil that softens their outlines. Gas lamps glow faintly in the haze, their flickering light creating golden halos against the evening air. This is the Victorian world, a place of invention, discovery, hardship, and resilience. To step into the daily life of ordinary people, here is to witness a world both beautiful and harsh. A world where survival often depended on work, endurance, and community. The grandeur of palaces and the glitter of high society might dominate paintings and books, but the heartbeat of the Victorian age lies in the footsteps of those who lived without wealth or privilege. Their stories are written in soot, stained hands, in tired yet determined faces, and in the quiet persistence that carried them through days filled with labor. As you walk along a London street, you notice how alive it feels. Street vendors call out their goods with sing-song voices, offering everything from roasted chestnuts to ribbons and cheap trinkets. Children dart through the crowds, their bare feet slapping against the wet stones, laughing as they chase one another despite the chill in the air. A flower seller stands at the corner, her basket brimming with small posies of violets and daisies, hoping to earn a few pennies before night falls. A horse-drawn omnibus rattles past, the driver snapping his whip as the animals pull heavily against the weight. And yet, beneath this bustling energy, there is struggle. You notice the worn coats of workers hurrying home after long hours in the factory. Their shoulders sag, and their faces are smeared with soot and sweat. Women carrying baskets filled with laundry move slowly down the streets, balancing burdens that seem almost too heavy for their frames. Their lives are not easy, yet there is something enduring in the way they press forward, step after step, day after day. Life for ordinary Victorians was shaped by the rhythm of the Industrial Revolution. For centuries, life in Britain had moved to the pace of farming seasons and village markets. But now, in the age of steam and iron, the pace had quickened dramatically. Factories roared with machinery, trains shrieked as they pulled into stations, filling the air with hissing steam. New inventions appeared almost daily, promising to change the way people lived and worked. To an ordinary man or woman, these changes could seem both exciting and overwhelming. Imagine a young man, perhaps in his 20s, rising before dawn in a cramped room he shares with his family. He pulls on his rough woolen clothes, already patched in places, and steps out into the dark morning air. His breakfast might be no more than a piece of bread dipped in weak tea before he sets off to the factory. Inside, the sound is deafening. Machines clatter and hiss, their great iron parts moving with relentless speed. He spends hour after hour feeding cotton into spindles, his hands moving quickly, almost automatically. By the end of the day, his body aches, his eyes strain, and yet he knows he will return tomorrow, because the small wage he earns is the difference between food on the table and hunger. Now imagine a woman in another part of the city. Her day begins before sunrise as well, not with the sound of factory whistles, but with the cries of children. She rises from a thin mattress, ties her hair back, and sets to work immediately. Water must be carried from the communal pump down the street, and coal must be fetched for the small fire. She scrubs clothes in a wooden tub, her hands red and raw from the cold water and soap. Later, she might walk to a nearby house where she works as a servant, cleaning floors, polishing silver, and scrubbing dishes until her back bends with exhaustion. For her, there is no leisure, only the constant weight of responsibility, the need to keep her family fed and clothed. Children, too, were part of this world of labor. Though reforms slowly began to reduce the harshest practices, in many places boys and girls still worked long hours. Imagine a child of 8 years old, small for his age, climbing into the narrow spaces of a coal mine. His face is smudged with soot, his tiny hands clutching a pick or pushing a cart along dark tunnels. The air is thick, the light dim, and the work relentless. Another child, perhaps a girl, sits in a factory beside her mother, tying threads or picking apart fibers until her eyes sting and her fingers ache. For them, play and rest are rare luxuries, replaced by the unyielding demands of survival. And yet, even in these difficult lives, there are moments of beauty and hope. Walk through a working-class neighborhood in the evening, and you might hear the sound of singing drifting from open windows. Families gather together after supper, sitting close around a small fire. Someone reads aloud from the Bible or from a penny novel bought cheaply on the street. Children huddle together under blankets, listening with wide eyes to stories of faraway lands or heroic deeds. These moments of rest are precious, small islands of comfort in a sea of labor. The streets themselves tell stories. In wealthier districts, tall townhouses stand proudly with polished doors and gleaming windows. But in the poorer quarters, rows of cramped tenements rise close together, their walls damp, their roofs sagging. Inside, families squeeze into single rooms, sleeping side by side on straw mattresses or wooden boards. Privacy is rare, and the noise of neighbors filters easily through thin walls. Still, these homes are decorated with what little people can afford. Perhaps a few flowers in a jar, a picture cut from a newspaper, or a handmade quilt passed down through generations. Food, too, reflects the divide between rich and poor. For the ordinary Victorian, meals were plain and repetitive. Bread, porridge, and potatoes formed the backbone of the diet. Cheese might be added when possible, and meat was considered a treat, saved for Sundays or special occasions. In the city markets, stalls offered fish, pies, and vegetables, but many families could only afford the cheapest cuts or the most basic ingredients. Yet tea was a constant companion, a source of warmth and comfort. Strong and dark, sweetened with sugar when it could be spared, tea was more than a drink. It was a ritual that brought relief at the end of a weary day. Religion also played a central role in daily life. Churches dotted every town and village, their bells marking the passage of time. For ordinary Victorians, Sunday was often the only true day of rest. Families would dress in their best clothes, however modest, and walk together to the local parish. Inside, the air smelled of wood polish and candle wax, the voices of hymns rising together in harmony. Faith provided not only spiritual guidance, but also a sense of community, a reminder that life, no matter how difficult, carried meaning. As you wander further into this world, you begin to notice the sense of change that lingers in the air. The Victorians lived in an age of great discovery and invention. To ordinary people, these marvels could seem almost magical. The arrival of the railway transformed lives, allowing travel across distances that once seemed impossible. The telegraph carried messages at lightning speed, connecting towns and cities in ways unimaginable to earlier generations. Photography captured images of loved ones, freezing moments in time. For ordinary men and women, these wonders brought both amazement and curiosity, whispers of a world growing larger and faster. But the pace of change did not erase the enduring qualities of daily life. In the evenings, after work was done, streets grew quieter. Gas lamps flickered to life, casting their glow on damp cobblestones. The sound of horses' hooves echoed as carriages passed by. Families closed their doors against the chill, gathering in the warmth of their homes. Neighbors shared news, children played simple games, and women mended clothes by the light of small lamps. It was a life of endurance, yes, but also of resilience, where community and family were lifelines. To walk among these ordinary Victorians is to see a world balanced between hardship and hope. Their days were heavy with labor, yet lightened by moments of laughter, love, and simple joys. They did not possess the wealth or luxury of the elite, but they held onto something perhaps even stronger, the ability to endure, to adapt, and to find meaning in the ordinary. Their world was filled with smoke and soot, yet also with song and story. It was a world of narrow alleys and crowded rooms, but also of wide skies and open fields just beyond the city. And as you let these images settle in your mind, you begin to see the Victorians not as distant figures from a forgotten age, but as people very much like ourselves, people who dreamed, who struggled, who loved, and who carried on through the challenges of their time. Their world, though different, reminds us of the strength and resilience that lies within the human spirit. So let yourself linger here a little longer on these quiet streets of the past. Hear the faint toll of a church bell, the soft murmur of voices, the clatter of a horse's hooves fading into the distance. See the glow of a lamp in a window, the steam rising from a teacup, the small circle of a family gathered around a fire. Let these images soothe your mind, slow your thoughts, and carry you gently into rest, as the Victorian world wraps itself around you like a blanket of memory. The morning begins before the first light touches the rooftops. The streets are still quiet, wrapped in a soft grayness, but within the narrow homes of ordinary Victorians, people are already rising from restless sleep. For the working men and women of this age, there is little luxury of lingering in bed. The day is ruled not by comfort, but by the steady demands of labor. Work is the axis around which everything else turns, shaping their lives with an almost unyielding grip. In a small cottage on the edge of a growing industrial town, a man pulls himself from his bed, the straw mattress sagging beneath him, the air heavy with dampness. He stretches his tired limbs, the aches of yesterday still lingering in his muscles, but there is no time to rest. Outside, the faint whistle of a factory horn signals the beginning of another long day. He dresses quickly in his work clothes, worn trousers, a coarse shirt, boots scuffed from years of wear. His wife hands him a small piece of bread, perhaps spread thinly with dripping if they can afford it, and a tin of weak tea to carry with him. This will be all he has until midday, if there is a pause long enough to eat. The streets begin to stir with life as men like him step into the cold air. Their boots strike the cobblestones in a slow rhythm as they move toward the factories that loom over the town, their tall chimneys already belching smoke into the sky. The air is thick with soot, the ground dusted with coal, and the sound of machinery hums faintly even from a distance. As the men draw nearer, the noise becomes a roar, endless, mechanical, and unrelenting. This is the world of work for so many ordinary Victorians, a world shaped by machines and the steady march of industry. Inside the factory, the air is hot and close. The smell of oil and metal fills the nostrils, mingled with sweat and dust. Rows upon rows of machines line the floor, their gears grinding, their belts spinning, their wheels turning with relentless energy. The noise is deafening, a constant clatter and whir that makes conversation nearly impossible. Men stand at their stations, feeding materials into machines, lifting heavy loads, hammering, shaping, measuring, and repeating the same movements hour after hour. The work is not only exhausting but dangerous. Fingers can be caught in moving parts, limbs injured by sharp blades, and lungs filled with dust. Yet these risks are part of the job, endured silently because to lose this work is to face hunger. The hours stretch endlessly. 12-hour days are common, sometimes even longer. The factory horn marks the beginning and end of shifts, a sound that governs lives more firmly than any clock at home. Breaks are brief, often no more than enough time to swallow a few bites of bread or sip from a tin of tea. Then the men return to their places, the machines never pausing, the rhythm of industry never slowing. The body tires, the mind dulls, but still the work continues, for the wages earned here, however meager, are the lifeline for families waiting at home. While men toil in factories, others labor in the shipyards, foundries, or mines. In the shipyard, the air rings with the clang of hammers on metal as great vessels are built piece by piece. Sparks fly, wood creaks, iron groans under the weight of construction. In the foundry, the heat is almost unbearable. Molten metal glows like fire, poured into molds, the workers' faces glistening with sweat as they endure the searing heat. In the mines, the air is heavy and damp, the light dim. Men descend deep into the earth, hacking at coal with pickaxes, loading carts, and straining their bodies in narrow tunnels where the walls seem to press in. Each type of work carries its own dangers, yet each is necessary for the growing empire, for the power that fuels the cities and drives the factories. For women, the world of labor is different but no less demanding. Some remain at home, where the very act of keeping house is itself an endless form of work. Water must be fetched, fires tended, clothes washed by hand in cold water until fingers are numb. Floors must be scrubbed, meals prepared, children cared for. The housewife's day begins with the rising of the sun and ends only when every task is done. Yet even then there is little rest. For many women, this unpaid labor is the backbone of family survival, though rarely is it acknowledged or valued by society. Others work outside the home, taking positions as domestic servants in wealthier households. For them, the hours are long and the work ceaseless. A maid might rise before dawn to light fires, sweep floors, polish boots, and prepare breakfast before the family of the house even wakes. Throughout the day she cleans, washes, irons, and attends to countless small tasks, often until late into the night. Servants are expected to be invisible, their presence felt only in the smooth running of the household. Their own needs and desires are secondary, their lives bound to the demands of their employers. Some women find work as seamstresses, bending over needles and fabric from dawn to dusk. Their eyes strain in the dim light, their fingers grow sore, but each stitch earns only a few pennies. Others labor in laundries, where steam rises in thick clouds, and arms ache from scrubbing, wringing, and lifting heavy loads of wet cloth. Shop assistants stand for long hours, serving customers with polite smiles, even as their feet swell with pain. In each case, the work is monotonous, tiring, and poorly paid, but it is work that keeps families from destitution. The life of labor extends even to children, though reforms slowly begin to offer protection. In earlier decades, children as young as 5 or 6 work long hours in factories and mines. Their small size makes them useful for crawling beneath machines to fix threads or carrying coal through narrow tunnels. They rise in the dark, their eyes heavy with sleep, their small bodies dressed in rags. Their work is dangerous, their childhood shortened by necessity. Over time, laws restrict the youngest from such harsh labor, but many still find themselves employed in small workshops, selling goods on the streets, or working as errand boys and girls. For them, play is fleeting, overshadowed by the pressing need to earn. The rhythm of labor defines every aspect of Victorian life. The factory whistle is the clock, marking when to wake, when to eat, when to sleep. Time is measured not in leisure, but in shifts, in the endless repetition of days that look much the same. For many, the body becomes an extension of the machine, moving in practiced patterns, efficient and unyielding. Yet even in this monotony, there is resilience. Men share brief jokes with one another when the overseer looks away. Women exchange small kindnesses as they pass in the street, offering words of encouragement. Children laugh when they can, turning even a few minutes of rest into play. At the end of the day, the workers pour out of factories and workshops, their faces lined with fatigue. The air outside feels fresher, though still heavy with smoke. They walk home slowly, their bodies aching, their minds dulled by hours of labor. Yet as they step through the doors of their homes, a different kind of work begins. The evening meal must be prepared, clothes mended, children tended. Even rest is filled with tasks, and true leisure is a rare gift. And yet, for all its hardship, work carries meaning. It is the lifeline of families, the thread that ties communities together. Wages, however small, keep bread on the table, roofs overhead, and fires burning through the cold months. Work is survival, but it is also endurance, the daily act of pressing forward despite fatigue and weariness. It shapes the bodies and souls of ordinary Victorians, leaving marks that last a lifetime. To walk through their world is to see hands calloused by tools, backs bent by lifting, eyes tired from long hours of strain. But it is also to see the quiet strength that allows them to rise again each morning to face the demands of another day. Their labor built the factories, fueled the trains, powered the ships, and sustained the growing cities. Their toil, often unseen and uncelebrated, was the foundation of the Victorian age. And as you let these images settle in your mind, you begin to understand that the story of ordinary Victorians is not one of wealth or comfort, but of endurance. Their days were ruled by work, shaped by labor, and defined by survival. Yet within this labor was also dignity, the dignity of persistence, of carrying on, of shaping a life in the face of hardship. It is this quiet dignity that lingers, that reaches across the years to remind us of the strength that lies in the ordinary, the power that lies in simply enduring. So, as the factory whistle fades into silence and the last workers return to their homes, imagine the streets growing quiet once more. The lamps glow softly, the fog settles, and the hum of machines drifts into the distance. Let the image of these laboring men, women, and children rest in your mind, their footsteps echoing faintly on the cobblestones, as you drift gently into your own rest, carried by the enduring spirit of those who came before. The world of the Victorian child was unlike the childhood we imagine today. To step into their lives is to enter a space where innocence was often brief, where play was overshadowed by work, and where survival required even the youngest members of a family to share in its burdens. When we think of childhood, we picture laughter, games, carefree days of discovery. For many children in Queen Victoria's Britain, those moments did exist, but they were fleeting, tucked between hours of labor, responsibility, and the struggles of poverty. Imagine a small boy, no more than 7 or 8 years old, rising from a straw mattress in a cramped room he shares with his parents and siblings. The room is cold, damp creeping through the walls, the air heavy with the scent of smoke from last night's fire. He rubs sleep from his eyes, pulls on his worn trousers and shirt, and prepares to leave the house before the sun has even risen, while his parents may still be at home or already heading to their own places of work. This boy is bound for the factory. His footsteps echo down the cobblestone street as he joins a group of other children, some younger than he is, all moving toward the looming building where the day's labor awaits. Inside the factory, the noise is overwhelming. Machines whir, gears grind, belts spin at terrifying speeds. The boy's job might be to dart between machines, tying loose threads that threaten to halt production, or crawling beneath spinning wheels to collect dropped fibers. His small size makes him valuable, but it also places him in danger. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and he risks being caught in the machinery. The overseer's eyes are always watching, quick to scold or strike if the children falter. Hour after hour, he bends, ties, runs, and fetches, his body weary long before the day is done. Elsewhere, another child begins her morning in a different way. She is a girl of perhaps 10 years, her hair tied back hastily, her dress patched and too small for her growing frame. She follows her mother to the laundry, where they spend the day among great steaming tubs of boiling water. Her arms ache as she scrubs clothes against a board, her hands red and raw from soap and heat. When the load is finished, more arrives, an endless cycle of washing, wringing, drying, and folding. For her, the work is not just a way to pass the time, but a contribution to the family's survival. Each coin she earns, however small, helps to put bread on the table. Some children find themselves working in the mines. Picture a boy of 9, his small body squeezing into narrow tunnels where grown men cannot fit. A dim lamp flickers in the darkness, casting weak light on the coal-streaked walls. He pushes a cart loaded with heavy stones, his muscles straining, his back bent. The air is thick, hard to breathe, filled with dust that clings to his skin and fills his lungs. Hours pass in darkness, broken only by the sound of picks striking stone and carts grinding over rough tracks. When he emerges at last into the daylight, the sun blinds him, and his face is blackened with soot. Yet tomorrow he will return because his labor is needed, his pennies vital. There are also children who climb chimneys, sent up narrow, soot-filled shafts with brushes tied to their small bodies. They scrape and scrub as they inch their way upward, their knees and elbows raw from the rough brick, their lungs choked with soot. It is dangerous, terrifying work, yet many masters continue to use children because of their size and agility. For these young chimney sweeps, fear becomes a daily companion, and their childhood is swallowed by shadows and ash. Not all work is so grueling or dangerous, but even the lighter tasks weigh heavily on young shoulders. In towns and cities, children line the streets selling matches, flowers, or newspapers. They call out their goods in thin voices, hoping to catch the attention of passers-by. The pennies they earn are quickly spent on food for their families, leaving little for themselves. Some become errand boys, running messages across town, their legs carrying them from one end of the city to the other in all weather. Others find themselves in workshops, learning trades, but also laboring for long hours under the strict eyes of masters. And yet, even within this world of work, moments of childhood still flicker. A boy delivering newspapers might pause to skim the headlines, imagining worlds beyond his own. A girl carrying laundry might stop to smile at a friend across the street. In the brief pauses of the day, children play small games, skipping stones, tossing a ball made of rags, or chasing one another through the alleys. Their laughter rises above the noise of the city, a reminder that even in hardship, the spirit of youth cannot be entirely erased. The evenings bring their own rhythm. Children return home, exhausted, their small bodies worn down by labor. Yet home is rarely a place of ease. In crowded tenements, brothers and sisters share beds, huddling together for warmth. Supper may be no more than bread and broth, eaten quickly before sleep claims them. Parents look upon their children with pride and sorrow both, knowing how much is asked of them and how little choice there is. In their eyes, each child's labor is a sacrifice made for the survival of the family. As the Victorian age progressed, reformers began to recognize the toll this life took on children. Laws slowly emerged to restrict child labor, to require schooling, to protect the youngest from the harshest work. But change was slow, and for many families, the need for income outweighed the promise of education. Even as schools opened their doors, children often attended only part-time, their lessons squeezed between hours of work. For those who did attend regularly, the classroom became a new kind of world, a place of learning, of books and maps, of dreams that stretched beyond the confines of their daily struggles. Still, the reality for countless children was one of endurance. Their childhoods were shaped by necessity, their games played in brief snatches, their toys often homemade or imagined. A hoop rolled down a street, a doll fashioned from scraps of cloth, a simple tune whistled in the evening air. These became the treasures of youth. And perhaps in their simplicity, they held a joy that wealth could not buy. The lives of Victorian children remind us of resilience. They carried burdens too heavy for their age, yet within them lived a strength that kept families alive, a spirit that endured despite hardship. Their laughter, when it came, was brighter for being rare. Their dreams, when spoken, carried the weight of longing. To see the world through their eyes is to see a childhood both fragile and fierce, marked by labor, but also by the unbreakable will to live, to grow, to hope. So let yourself imagine walking down a Victorian street at dusk. You see children running home, their bare feet pattering on the stones, their voices carrying through the misty air. Some hold baskets of flowers, others clutch newspapers under their arms, still others drag weary bodies back from factories or mines. Yet in their eyes you catch glimpses of light, sparks of youth that refuse to be extinguished. The lamps flicker on, the streets grow quiet, and families gather indoors. For the children of the Victorian age, another day has ended and another will begin tomorrow. Their stories linger in the air, carried forward through time, reminding us of the strength of the young and the endurance of the human spirit. And as you hold these images in your mind, let them soften your thoughts. Hear the fading laughter of children echoing through the night, the gentle hush of the streets settling into silence. See the small figures curling under blankets, eyes closing, bodies giving in at last to sleep. In their dreams, perhaps they escape the weight of their days, finding themselves in fields of play, in places of light and joy. Let those dreams drift over you too, carrying you gently into your own rest, as the world of Victorian children fades softly into the distance. In the quiet rhythm of daily life, nothing speaks more clearly of the ordinary Victorian experience than food and the places they called home. These two elements, what was eaten and where people lived, formed the foundation of survival, shaping each day with routines that were both comforting and challenging. To step into the kitchens and homes of ordinary Victorians is to discover a world of simplicity, scarcity, endurance, and small joys woven into the fabric of family life. The day often began with a modest breakfast. For working families in towns and cities, the meal might be little more than bread, sometimes spread with dripping, the fat saved from meat, melted down and stored to be used sparingly. If the family could afford it, tea would be poured into mismatched cups, steaming and strong, sometimes sweetened with a little sugar if the week's wages had stretched far enough. Milk, when it was available, was often watered down by dishonest sellers before it even reached the household, but it still softened the tea and gave it a touch of comfort. Porridge was another common start to the day. Oats boiled slowly until they thickened into a filling, if plain, meal. Children would eat quickly before rushing out to work, their bellies warmed just enough to face the long hours ahead. For those in rural areas, breakfast could sometimes be heartier. A small farm family might have eggs from their own hens or milk from their cow. Bread, baked in a stone oven or purchased from a village baker, was a daily staple, its smell filling the air as it was sliced and shared. Yet even in the countryside, families lived close to the edge of need, stretching what little they had, making every crumb count. The midday meal was rarely elaborate. In the cities, workers might bring a piece of bread wrapped in cloth, a hunk of cheese, or a cold potato from the night before. If fortunate, a man might purchase a small meat pie or a bowl of stew from a street cellar, eaten quickly in the shadow of the factory before returning to the noise and heat inside. Children in workshops or on the streets often had no more than a crust of bread, eaten with small bites to make it last longer. Women at home might stop their endless chores only briefly to sip tea or nibble bread before returning to their tasks. The evening meal, when families gathered together again, was the heart of Victorian home life. It might still be simple, but it was shared, and in the sharing lay its meaning. Potatoes were boiled and served plain or mashed with a little butter, if butter could be spared. Vegetables such as cabbage, carrots, or turnips appeared when they were in season and affordable. Meat was rare for the poor, but when it could be bought, it was stretched as far as possible. A small joint of beef or mutton might be stewed with vegetables to create enough for everyone, the broth filling empty stomachs even when the meat itself was scarce. Fish, often cheaper, appeared in meals too. Herring, cod, or whiting, fried or stewed, sold cheaply at markets and street stalls. Sundays offered a chance for something special. Families saved throughout the week to purchase a bit of meat for the Sunday dinner, a roast that was carefully cooked and savored, even the smallest piece, surrounded by potatoes and perhaps a pudding, felt like a feast. For many, Sunday meals were remembered as the highlight of the week, a time when hunger was briefly eased, and the family felt wealthy in spirit if not in coin. Bread remained at the center of nearly every meal. It was purchased fresh daily when possible, carried home in cloth bags, and sliced to feed many mouths. To waste bread was unthinkable. Stale loaves were soaked in milk and baked into puddings, or fried in fat to create filling dishes. The crusts and crumbs found their way into soups and broths, nothing allowed to go unused. It was sustenance in its most basic form, dependable and familiar. For the poorest families, hunger was a constant shadow. There were days when meals consisted only of weak tea and bread, when mothers went without food so that children could eat. In the harshest times, charity kitchens offered bowls of gruel or bread to those in desperate need. The workhouse, dreaded by all, provided food that was meager and joyless, meant only to keep bodies alive rather than to nourish. Yet even here, ordinary people clung to dignity, sharing what they had, offering kindness to one another in the face of scarcity. Alongside food, The spaces in which families lived shaped their daily lives just as strongly. In the growing industrial cities, housing was cramped, built quickly to accommodate the flood of workers pouring in from the countryside. Rows of terraced houses stood close together, their bricks blackened by soot, their windows small and often cracked. In the poorest districts, entire families might share a single room. The space served as kitchen, bedroom, and living room all in one, every corner filled with necessity. Beds were shared by multiple children, parents slept alongside the youngest, and privacy was a luxury unknown. The walls of these rooms were often damp, the air heavy with smoke from small coal fires that barely warmed the space. Furniture was sparse, perhaps a wooden table, a few chairs, a cupboard to store what little was owned. Floors were made of bare boards or stone, cold beneath bare feet in winter. Water had to be fetched from pumps in the street or yards, carried in heavy buckets back to the home. Sanitation was poor, with outdoor privies shared by many households and waste often running through open gutters. Disease spread easily in such conditions, yet families endured, making homes out of what little they had. Still, within these small, crowded spaces, there was warmth. A vase of flowers picked from a hedgerow, a picture cut from a newspaper and pinned to the wall, a hand-stitched quilt on the bed. All these small touches spoke of pride and care. Families created homes with love, even when resources were scarce, and within those homes, bonds grew strong. The hearth, however small, became the heart of the house. It was here that meals were cooked, clothes were dried, and stories were told in the evenings. Around the fire, families gathered, the flickering flames casting shadows on the walls as voices rose in song or laughter. In rural cottages, life was different but carried its own challenges. Houses were often built of stone or timber, with thatched roofs and low ceilings. Floors were made of packed earth or flagstones, and windows let in little light. Families relied on the land for much of their food, vegetables grown in gardens, eggs from hens, milk from cows or goats. Yet money was still needed for goods that could not be produced at home, and so even here, children and parents worked long hours in fields or workshops. The cottages, though humble, were surrounded by nature, hedgerows alive with birds, fields stretching into the distance, the rhythm of seasons marking the passage of time. In these spaces, home life was shaped not by the factory whistle, but by the rising and setting of the sun. Whether in town or countryside, the home was more than just shelter. It was a place of gathering, of sharing burdens and joys, of teaching children values and traditions. It was here that ordinary Victorians found strength to face each new day. Despite the challenges of cramped conditions, poor sanitation, or limited food, they built lives filled with resilience. Their homes, however small, were filled with the sound of voices, the smell of simple meals cooking, the presence of love and care. As you picture these homes, imagine stepping quietly into one of them on a winter evening. A small fire glows in the hearth, casting warmth into the cold air. A pot of stew bubbles gently, filling the room with the smell of potatoes and onions. Children huddle under blankets, their cheeks flushed from the cold, listening as their mother hums softly while she mends a shirt. The father sits tired but content, sipping tea and speaking of the day's work. The room is dim, the furniture worn, but the sense of togetherness is strong. It is here, in these moments, that life's meaning is most clearly seen, not in wealth or luxury, but in the simple act of sharing food, warmth, and love. The story of food and home for ordinary Victorians is not one of abundance, but one of endurance. It is the story of families stretching every penny, making meals from little, finding comfort in small rituals. It is the story of homes built with care even when walls were thin and roofs leaked, of fires kept burning even when coal was scarce. It is the story of resilience, of making do, of holding on to dignity in the face of want. And as you hold these images in your mind, let them guide you gently toward rest. see the small table set for supper, the steam rising from a simple meal, the glow of the fire flickering on tired but content faces. Hear the murmur of voices, the laughter of children, the quiet hum of a lullaby. Feel the warmth of the hearth, the closeness of family, the peace that settles as night falls. Let the world of Victorian food and home life wrap around you like a quilt, comforting and steady as you drift softly into sleep, carried by the timeless rhythm of ordinary lives lived with quiet strength. In the midst of the long hours, the labor, and the endless demands of survival, ordinary Victorians sought spaces where their bodies and spirits could rest. It was in these moments of pause, in the quiet hours of the week, in faith that reached across poverty and struggle, and in the simplest of pleasures, that people discovered balance. Their lives were marked by difficulty, but never devoid of joy. And it is in the rhythms of rest, the rituals of worship, and the small delights of everyday life that the true humanity of the Victorian age emerges most clearly. The workday for most men, women, and children stretched far beyond what we imagine today. 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes longer, filled with constant motion. Yet when the whistle finally blew, when machines fell silent, and when tools were laid aside, a new rhythm began. The streets filled with workers heading home, their bodies weary, their steps heavy, but their minds turning toward the promise of rest. For some, that meant nothing more than sinking into a chair beside the fire or collapsing into bed as exhaustion claimed them. For others, evenings were a chance to connect with family, with neighbors, with the small world outside the factory gates. Imagine a narrow street at dusk, lamps beginning to glow, the air carrying the scent of smoke from countless chimneys. Men return home, their boots coated with dust, their jackets worn thin. Women finish the last of the day's chores, scrubbing, mending, preparing what little food remains. Children, though weary from their own labors, find the energy to play, their laughter bouncing between the brick walls as they chase one another with hoops or skip ropes made from twine. These moments of rest were not elaborate, not extravagant, but they carried within them a sweetness born of contrast. After endless hours of toil, the smallest joy felt luminous. Sunday was the day most treasured, not only for the chance to rest, but also for the rhythm of faith. For ordinary Victorians, religion was not an abstract part of life. It was the framework by which life was understood, the source of comfort in hardship, the promise of hope in times of despair. Churches filled each Sunday morning, their bells ringing across fields and streets, calling the faithful to gather. Step into a Victorian church, and you would feel the solemn hush, the rows of wooden pews filled with families, their best clothes carefully patched and pressed. Hymns rose from tired throats, voices joining together in song that lifted above the struggles of daily life. The sermon, sometimes stern, sometimes tender, offered reminders of duty, of morality, of endurance. For the poor, religion offered a promise that the trials of this world were not the end, that a greater rest awaited in the life to come. For the weary, it was a moment to lay burdens down, to sit in the quiet, and be reminded that their struggles were seen, their pain not forgotten. Children, too, found themselves within this rhythm of faith. Sunday schools flourished, offering not only lessons in Scripture, but also the rare chance to learn letters and numbers. For boys and girls who might never see the inside of a formal classroom, the Sunday school became a gateway to knowledge, to hold a book, to sound out words, to understand stories. These were gifts as nourishing as bread. In the repetition of hymns and verses, in the quiet of prayer, children found both discipline and comfort. But Sundays were not only about solemnity, they were also days of small joy. Families prepared their best meal of the week, perhaps roasting a piece of meat, boiling extra vegetables, or baking a pudding to mark the occasion. The food was savored more slowly, the family lingering at the table, conversation replacing the hurried bites of weekday suppers. Afternoons might be spent walking through parks, visiting relatives, or simply resting in the peace of the day. For many, Sunday was the only day when work stopped, when fathers could sit with their children, when mothers could breathe a little easier, when laughter could rise freely. Beyond faith and formal rest, ordinary Victorians found joy in the simplest of things. A song sung in the evening, a story told by firelight, a game played in the street. Music was central to many households. Even those who could not afford instruments sang together, voices filling the small rooms of cramped houses. Folk songs, hymns, and popular ballads carried stories of love, hardship, and hope, passed from one generation to the next. Where a piano or fiddle could be afforded, neighbors gathered to listen, tapping their feet, humming along, letting music lift them out of the weariness of their bodies. Stories, too, filled the hours of rest. In homes where books were scarce, tales were told aloud, folk legends, family histories, or news heard from neighbors. Children listened wide-eyed as parents or grandparents spoke of past times, of adventures imagined, of moral lessons woven into narrative. The flicker of firelight, the cadence of a familiar voice, the warmth of togetherness turned these stories into cherished moments. And then there were the simple pleasures of the outdoors. Even in crowded cities, workers sought the open air whenever possible. Parks, increasingly built in industrial towns, offered green spaces where families strolled. Children played, and tired eyes found relief in trees and grass instead of soot, blackened bricks. A Sunday walk became a ritual for many, a way to reconnect with nature, to breathe more deeply, to let the mind wander. In the countryside, such pleasures were part of daily life. Villagers walked lanes bordered by hedgerows, paused to watch birds on the wing, felt the change of seasons in the air around them. Holidays, though rare, brought great excitement. Fairs and festivals punctuated the year, offering respite from routine. Stalls sold sweets, toys, and trinkets, while music and laughter filled the air. Children's eyes widened at the sight of brightly colored ribbons, spinning tops, or gingerbread figures. Adults found delight in the chance to gather, to share food and drink, to dance or watch performances. These occasions, though few, lingered in memory, shining against the gray backdrop of daily struggle. Even small rituals at home carried joy. A cup of tea shared with a neighbor, the careful mending of clothes while chatting with friends, the warmth of a blanket on a cold night. Each was a moment of reprieve, of comfort. Ordinary Victorians were masters of finding sweetness in simplicity, of cherishing what little they had, of weaving joy into the fabric of survival. For many, rest and joy were also intertwined with imagination. Dreams offered escape, stories offered hope, faith offered perspective. A factory worker might hum a hymn under his breath as he walked home, each note carrying him beyond the walls of industry. A mother might whisper prayers as she tucked her children into bed, her heart lifting with the thought that tomorrow might be kinder. A child, falling asleep after a long day's work, might dream not of soot and noise, but of fields, laughter, and light. And in this way, rest and joy became acts of resilience. They were not simply pauses in labor, but quiet rebellions against despair. To gather for worship, to sing, to walk in the park, to laugh over a meal, these were ways of saying, we are more than our work, more than our poverty, more than our struggle. We are families, neighbors, communities. We are people capable of love, of song, of hope. Picture, if you will, an ordinary Victorian evening. The day's work has ended, the family has eaten their meal, the fire burns low in the hearth. Children lean against one another, eyes heavy with sleep, listening as their mother hums a tune. The father tells a story of his own childhood, his voice deep and steady. Outside, The streets are quieting, the gas lamps flicker, the city exhales after its long day. Within this small home, joy glimmers. Not the joy of riches or ease, but the joy of togetherness, of shared faith, of simple pleasures. It is in these quiet moments that the Victorian spirit shines most clearly. Rest was scarce, faith was tested, joys were simple, but they were enough. They carried families through hardship, they gave strength for tomorrow, they bound communities together in bonds that endured. To look back on these lives is to see not only toil and struggle, but resilience, creativity, and love. And now, as you hold these images in your mind, let them soften your thoughts. See the flickering firelight, hear the echo of hymns sung in small churches, feel the gentle rhythm of a Sunday walk beneath trees. Imagine the laughter of children playing in the street, the murmur of neighbors sharing tea, the hush of a family settling into rest. Let these simple joys wrap around you like a warm blanket, easing your own weariness, reminding you of the timeless strength found in the smallest things. Drift gently into sleep, carried by the echo of Victorian voices that found peace not in wealth or ease, but in the quiet gifts of rest, faith, and simple joys. The story of the Victorians does not end with their own lifetimes. Though their days were filled with work and their nights with weariness, though their lives often seemed small compared to the grand tales of queens and empires, it is their legacy that continues to shape the world in quiet, enduring ways. The ordinary men, women, and children of the Victorian era left behind more than bricks and cobblestones, more than factories and smoke. They left behind lessons of resilience, of community, of endurance, and of hope. To walk through their memory is to see how lives lived in simplicity can echo across generations, reminding us of what it means to be human. When we picture the Victorians, we often think first of progress, the invention of railways, the rise of industry, the great works of literature, the expansion of empire. But beneath those towering stories, the foundation was laid by countless unnamed hands. It was the ordinary worker who built the rail lines, hammering steel under sun and rain. It was the seamstress who stitched clothes that filled the shops of London. It was the miner who dug coal that powered the engines, the maid who scrubbed floors until they shone, the farmer who coaxed crops from tired soil. These lives, rarely recorded in books or remembered in statues, were the quiet engine of change. Without them, the great Victorian achievements could not have stood. Their legacy is written in the very fabric of modern life, even if their names are lost to history. Yet the legacy of the ordinary Victorian is not only in what they built, but in how they lived. Their endurance teaches us that dignity can exist even in poverty, that families can thrive in love even when coin is scarce, that joy can be found in the simplest of things. Imagine again the crowded tenement room, where a family gathers around a small fire. The meal is plain, the space cramped, but the warmth of laughter and the comfort of togetherness fill the air. That strength, the ability to create beauty within hardship, is a gift passed down through time. It reminds us, even now, that we too can find peace in simplicity, that we too can endure trials with grace. For children especially, the legacy is profound. Their lives were marked by labor, their hands blistered, their bodies weary before they had even grown tall. Yet through their sacrifice, families survived. Through their resilience, reforms were born. The sight of children bent beneath heavy loads stirred compassion, moved reformers to action, and gradually shaped laws that protect young ones even today. Each child who tied threads in a factory, who crawled through a mine, who scrubbed in a laundry, contributed not only to their family's survival, but to the larger story of progress. Their struggles forced society to look more closely at itself, to ask what it owed its youngest, to recognize that the measure of a civilization is found not in its wealth, but in how it treats its children. Their legacy lives in every classroom, in every law that guards children from exploitation, in every opportunity that young people now enjoy. The legacy of faith also endures. For countless ordinary Victorians, religion was the compass that guided them through difficulty. Their hymns still echo in churches, their prayers still shape traditions, their moral frameworks still ripple through culture. But beyond organized faith, their spiritual resilience speaks across time. They carried hope in the face of hardship. They looked beyond the soot-filled streets to imagine a brighter future. They believed that endurance had meaning. This legacy whispers to us in our own weariness, reminding us that hope is never wasted, that perseverance leaves an imprint not only on our lives, but on those who come after. Ordinary Victorians also left behind a legacy of community. In their crowded neighborhoods and small villages, they depended on one another. Neighbors shared bread when cupboards were bare. Mothers watched each other's children. Workers formed unions, lending strength to voices that alone would have gone unheard. In times of sickness, families cared for one another with what little they had. These acts of community, born of necessity, created bonds that were stronger than the hardships pressing against them. That spirit of leaning on one another, of finding strength in unity, is a gift that has not faded. In a world that often values independence above all, their lives remind us of the power of interdependence, of kindness, of shared struggle. Even in the realm of leisure, their legacy remains. The parks they cherished, the Sunday walks, the small rituals of rest and song, these planted seeds that grew into traditions we still know today. Public parks expanded, libraries opened, schools multiplied, and the idea that ordinary people deserved not only survival, but also joy took root. The legacy of the Victorian poor is not only toil, but also the recognition that every life deserves beauty, that even the most modest household can nurture song and laughter. Perhaps their greatest legacy, however, is the lesson of resilience. The Victorians lived in a time of great upheaval. Industrial smoke darkened skies, diseases spread through crowded streets, poverty tested every family, yet through it all they endured. They did not choose easy lives, but they lived fully within the lives they were given. They worked, they loved, they prayed, they dreamed. They held fast to hope even when days seemed endless and nights heavy with hunger. Their resilience speaks to us now, across more than a century, reminding us that strength does not always look like victory, that endurance itself is a triumph. Picture, if you will, a single Victorian street at night. The lamps glow dimly, casting pools of light onto cobblestones. Behind each door lies a different story. A seamstress leans over her work, her needle glinting in the flicker of the fire. A father sits with his children, telling them tales of his own childhood. A mother rocks a baby, humming softly, her voice steady despite her fatigue. A group of boys play one last game before bed, their laughter ringing out before they slip into sleep. Each life is small, perhaps forgotten by history, but each life is meaningful. Together, they weave the tapestry of the age, and their threads continue into our own time, invisible but unbroken. Their legacy is not in monuments or palaces, but in the ordinary. It is in the bread baked each morning, in the child's laugh on a narrow street, in the kindness of neighbors, in the songs sung by weary voices. It is in the way we now think of education as a right, of childhood as a sacred time, of workers as deserving of rest. It is in the countless small freedoms and comforts we take for granted, each one bought by the endurance of those who came before. As you let these images drift through your mind, notice how they soften the edges of thought. See the quiet street, the glow of the lamps, the flicker of countless fires burning in countless homes. Hear the faint hum of voices, the rhythm of a hymn, the laughter of children settling to rest. Feel the warmth of blankets, the comfort of family, the peace of ordinary moments. Let the legacy of the Victorians wrap around you. not as history locked away in books, but as a gentle reminder that strength lives in simplicity, that hope lives in endurance, that joy lives even in hardship. Their story becomes a lullaby for us, a soft song carried across time. It whispers that life need not be grand to be meaningful, that the ordinary is itself extraordinary. And as you close your eyes, as you drift into your own rest, let that legacy cradle you. Let it remind you that resilience is timeless, that love is enduring, and that the quiet strength of ordinary people is what truly shapes the world. And so, our journey through the lives of ordinary Victorians comes to a close. Their stories, simple yet profound, now rest gently in your mind as you drift deeper into peace. May the echoes of their resilience and quiet joys bring you comfort as sleep carries you away. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you found this journey soothing, I invite you to like this video, share it with others who may also find rest in history, and subscribe for more calming stories from the past. Your support helps keep these gentle histories alive. For now, let go of the day, let your thoughts grow still, and allow yourself to rest. Good night, sleep well, and may peace be with you until we meet again.